Let's stick with that story now, as France has come under fire overnight for allowing a migrant boat that crushed 5 people to death to continue its journey across the Channel to Great Britain.
Well, the victims, including a 7-year-old child, were travelling with 112 migrants on a small boat when the engine cut out several hundred yards from the shore.
TalkTV's chief political commentator Peter Cardwood joins us in studio this morning. Pete, good morning. It's a heartbreaking story.
It really is.
Different stories overnight. People tried to jump on boats. People were thrown overboard. They were crushed. I mean, honestly, the irony is the wrong word, Nick, but this was just a matter of hours after that damn Rwanda bill passed.
And illustrates the fact that whatever you think about the Rwanda bill, whether you think it's a tremendously terrible piece of legislation, whether you think it's a really good thing, whatever your views on it, this issue needs to be solved. Yeah. Something needs to be done, because this was, I mean, we've had quite a lot of detail. There was a BBC reporter who witnessed what actually happened here. This was a beach in a town near Bologna. And what happened was that they had, Bourgogne, I think, where they were bringing across migrants. The French authorities took a number of people off. There were 58 people who refused to get off, and they let that vessel go, knowing the vessel probably wasn't seaworthy. So we're paying the French something like £500 million a year to stop a lot of these migrant boats coming over. Quite a few of them have been stopped, and we always say the French are doing nothing. Well, they're not really. They say about 50% of the boats that try to take off or try to leave their shores, they actually stop. But in this case, they did not, and they've been under a lot of fire, not least for one Conservative MP on the Home Affairs Select Committee, Tim Loughton, who said that this is a disgrace and the French authorities needed to have done a lot more and are actually in some way liable, in his view, for what has happened here.
How can we hold the French accountable for that action, or the French police more specifically? Are there ways in which the deal between the UK and France could be reassessed or punished in some way? And
lots of people, well, I don't think there's much accountability in terms of individual people necessarily in this case, but certainly that cooperation with the French is something that Labour want to do a lot more of. The UK have tried, they've put lots of money into it, they've talked a lot.
Stop the money. Stop the money.
Yeah, well, that's one option.
These innocent people died yesterday. Stop the money.
But that's not going to stop people from dying.
And it's not going to stop people from leaving.
But giving them money isn't exactly coming out with the answer, is it?
Well, no, it isn't, although it's helping. It is helping
argue, how many more would there be?
It's helping to some degree, but certainly, look...
We're all agreed it's just a terrible
I think we can all agree, like, this, as you're intimating, Jeremy, the system isn't working at the moment. The way of dealing with, people are dying. And this is absolutely horrendous, and people are taking huge risks. Whether you are as critical as you can be of people coming across the Channel or not, these are people who are taking a huge risk. They're often in, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, which is very perilous. And as we've seen overnight, there's been a tragedy here.
Do you think that Labour's plans would make a difference?
They say they would. They certainly want there to be a crackdown on gangs. Now, Rishi Sunak would certainly say that there actually has been a crackdown on these gangs. We've had between 700 and 800 people sent to prison as a result. But obviously, there are thousands of people involved with this, and that's not nearly enough. Labour's plan is very different. They say they would scrap the Rwanda plan, but there does need to be some way in which...
They want to process abroad so that people do not, in France, maybe so that people don't make that perilous journey.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, maybe you could spend the 500 million quid on creating somewhere for that to happen. I don't know. I just think it's a disgrace, I think, for the whole of the world, but for this country, I think it's... honestly, I just think it looks... I think the optics are appalling and people are losing their lives and people in this country are rightly frustrated. Rishi Sunak, a good friend of this show, Jack Elsom, is on later. Yeah. He was obviously on the plane. There's an appalling photograph of Jack with his eyes closed with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak flying across to Poland yesterday. Am I going to be accused of being cynical by you, Cardi P?
No,
£75 billion. Most traditional Tory voters would say the highest taxation in 70 years, no fiscal responsibility, and let's be honest, rubbish military. And suddenly, all of a sudden, with a few months to go, £75 billion has materialised. This is a big moment for Sunak. Do you think it will make a difference?
Well, Jeremy, just because you're cynical doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong.
Good man, Cardi P.
The question is, where does this money come from?
Yep.
I think this is going to come up in Prime Minister's questions later on, or Deputy Prime Minister's questions more accurately.
Which would be fun in itself.
Yes, well, it's funny on that front, Jeremy, actually. I messaged someone in number 10 about this and said, is it a complete coincidence that Angela Rayner's been forced to do Deputy Prime Minister's questions, given all the consternation at the moment over her house? And this person sent back a message saying, it's a complete coincidence, and then a wink emoji. So there we are. Yes, so Rishi Sunak, yes, he's in Poland yesterday, in Germany today. And yes, where this money is actually coming from, because of course the Conservatives accuse Labour and saying your plans don't add up, where's the 28 billion for your green plan and so on. But actually, if you're putting 75 million quid, billion over the next 5 years, another 10 plus billion a year, well, more than that, well, then you're in a situation where you need to find that money somewhere. And they say they're not going to put up taxes and they're not going to reduce public spending. But where is it? Because all the forecasts that are out there from the Office of Budgetary Responsibility and whatever says that, and other places, say that there's no what they call fiscal headroom, extra money, essentially.
An election piece of bait, do you reckon?
Well, I think it's even more than that. So the local elections obviously are coming up in a couple of weeks' time, or well, actually just over a week's time. So I think the moment of maximum danger for Rishi Sunak is after those local elections. If it goes really badly for the Tories, which let's face it, it's going to, where Labour will do pretty well, Lib Dems less well, Reform we'll see. It'll be interesting to see where Rishi Sunak is. That's the moment of maximum danger. A lot of people, especially in the backbenches of his party, defence spending is a big, big thing that they want to go up. A lot of defence, a lot of bases in various constituencies of a lot of these MPs that want the amount of spending to go up. So is this to save his skin? Probably. Should it have happened previously? Yeah. He's about to have a meeting with Olaf Scholz, the Prime Minister of Germany. He'll be saying, you must increase defence spending. To which he will go, well, we're now going up to 2.5% of what the country makes of GDP. Yeah. What are you, Germany? Oh, yes, 2%. That's right.
They're such arbitrary figures, aren't they? It's quite difficult to get your head around something, £75 billion. But
you know what I'm saying, Nicola? A billion here, a billion there.
You know what I mean?
Sooner or later, all adds up to real money.
But the thing I always compare it to is Test, Track and Trace, which I think in total was around, I know the budget was 37 billion, but they ended up spending around 29 billion pounds. That's only half the defence budget for 6 years. And it begs the question, is our defence budget too low, or was what we spent on Test, Track and Trace just absolutely extortionate? I think it probably is the latter.
Well, this is the problem with public spending, because, I mean, the conception the public has of public spending is always really interesting. I mean, if you ask people, what does the government spend most money on? Loads of people, for example, in their first sort of 2 or 3 answers say, MPs pay. That's about £500 million. I mean, that's for everybody in Parliament. That's not in comparison to things like the defence budget, a huge amount of money. And it's also what that money does and whether it's spent efficiently as well, because there's so much waste, especially in defence spending.
One final thing, I'll get told off by Jamie, but I don't care. Angela Rayner today at Deputy Prime Minister's Question Times against Oliver Dowden. We're going to be talking about defence. She's going to get rinsed, isn't she, about her house? I haven't seen you for 2 weeks. I'm going to simply ask you the question I ask everybody. I quite like her. I think she brings something to politics. Why doesn't she just give the information? Because the longer this goes on, for me, it makes her look worse and worse. If she's telling the truth, come out with it. And quickly also, does this suit Keir Starmer? Yes,
it does suit Keir Starmer. I think we have to ask the question why he hasn't looked at the legal advice. The piece of paper, she says, exonerates her. He's the former chief prosecutor of this country. He's always talking about how he's a lawyer and how he's been an amazing prosecutor and KC and all the rest of it. Why doesn't he just look at the legal advice that exonerates his deputy? That's a fairly basic question in all of this. Is she going to get rinsed later? We'll see. She, as you correctly point out, Jeremy, is an amazing opposition politician.
I love her.
There may be a zinger from Oliver Dowden, but she's a better parliamentary performer, and I think she's going to have something in her back pocket in terms of saying some quip.
In her back pocket, she should have that tax information, just wave it about. Honestly, they're making a problem for themselves, in my humble opinion. You know what I'm saying?
And it's going to continue. It will be box office.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of box office, thank you, Peter Carr.
Do you know where he's going now?
Oh, he's going to be back here within an hour.
He's going to sleep in my dressing room because he's tired.
No, I'm not. I'm going to watch TalkTV in your dressing room.
Exactly.
That'll send you to sleep.
How very dare you, Jeremy?
How very dare you,